Welcome to the Fantasy Football Hub YouTube channel. Today I'm joined by FPL expert, the big man Bakar is back to have a look at Game Week 4. We've got a lot to discuss today, Bakar. Some injuries, form, potential transfers. You've not made any transfers yet, so you're still deliberating on what to do. So the people need your tips and advice for this game week. How are you doing, my friend? Another green arrow last week. But yeah, we need your help for this week now.
Hello, Jack. Thanks for having me. Hello and welcome to all the listeners and viewers. Yeah, it was a good week. It was actually the best of the season so far. I got 84 points. It was actually nice going into the international break on a bit of a high because the start of the season was a bit rough. But yeah, I mean, so far it's been smooth sailing in terms of transfers. But this is actually the first week where I'm really torn with my transfers, and I'm not really sure which route to take because I sort of get the feeling that so far, I had Kwanzaa, I decided to keep hold of him because I had a decent bench to cover, and then I had Nkunku and I sold him to Rogers, which again wasn't really a tough transfer to make because it was kind of obvious that Rogers was emerging as an enabler. But now this week there are different routes that I can take, and I have a feeling that it can be a very swingy week depending on which route I decide to take. So yeah, those transfers that I end up making this week can have massive repercussions in the grand scheme of things over the next 2 weeks. So I'm hoping I sort of get it right and end up on the positive side of variance. I was actually looking forward to the international break not ending, so it's actually ended a bit sooner than I wanted it to,
Wow.
and I'm sort of been put in this spot where I have to decide a route to take, and I'm still not sure which way to go.
Okay, so tell the people so far. Obviously, we've had, what, 8 or 9 days now since the last game week. Just what your general thinking has been, what the process has been since you've known that you have some issues in your team. How much has your opinion sort of changed with news or stuff? Are you sort of more concrete on a certain set of plans, or yeah, has your mind sort of shifted over the past week or so?
To be very honest, it hasn't really shifted much from where it was 2 weeks ago, but it's just that my team looks good on paper. It's not as if I have any potential injuries or any potential issues that I need to address. But I mean, there's this elephant in the room, which is called Salah, which I need to address, which needs addressing because I don't own him.
Okay.
And I'm sure a lot of other managers find themselves in a very similar position. I'd like to hear their thoughts in the comments and in the feedback as well as to what they think I should be doing with my team. But basically there are two or three options that I can take. My team looks all right on paper. I can decide going without Salah this week
Yeah.
with a view of potentially bringing him next week. The other option is that since I'm bringing him in next week, I can decide to bring him this week because his fixture this week is good anyway. So if I am to make that transfer next week, why sort of delay it? And I can just sort of bring it forward by a week. The third option, which is very risky and I don't think I'm going to take, is to just ignore Salah and make a long-term play and decide to hold the wild card for longer.
Okay.
Basically, long story short, getting Salah in this week or next week pretty much locks in a Game Week 6 wildcard for me. Now, I'll explain why. I have two free transfers in my team. If I decide to get Salah right now or next week, my route to Salah is realistically going to be Saka, right?
Yeah.
In Game Week 6, Arsenal are playing Southampton and Leicester in Game Week 6 and 7 at home in two back-to-back game weeks. I do not want to head into those two game weeks without Arsenal in my team. I actually want to have triple Arsenal. And the only way I can sort of do that is through wildcard, right? Similarly, I won't have Mbomo. Brentford have a good run of fixtures. There are plenty of areas where I can improve in my team. And I don't think I'd want Salah in my team from Game Week 6 onwards as well. So Salah is a short-term play for me. He has to come in for Game Week 4 and Game Week 5. Either I go for a long-term option and decide to hold the wildcard for longer and just get triple Arsenal easily on wildcard, by normal transfers by keeping hold of Saka and ignoring Salah, or I decide to get Salah in this week or next week and then wildcard my way into triple Arsenal and a one or two from Brentford in Game Week 6. That's where I'm at, and I'm sure a lot of listeners sort of feel themselves in a similar situation because this is a tough position to be in. And currently, I think bringing in Salah is wise for me. But what has made it really tricky is that I don't have any obvious route to him.
Yeah.
Right. If you can sort of bring up my team, you can see that it's a very tricky position to be in.
Yeah. So 1.5 million in the bank. You can't go straight there. That's the problem. So you have to use two transfers.
Yeah. The good thing is I have two free transfers.
Yeah.
Right. If I had one free transfer, I don't think I'd be bringing in Salah this week because I don't think he's the best captaincy option. I think Haaland is the best captaincy option. But because I have two free transfers, I am sort of thinking of bringing Salah in this week instead of sort of deferring it to next week.
Yeah.
But again, there's no obvious make with it, right? So I have João Pedro. Let's say if I didn't have João Pedro, I would have solely stacked to João Pedro and
Okay.
funded Saka to Salah. But because I began the season with João Pedro, I mean, I'm not complaining. That's one of the moves I got right. It sort of locks me out of downgrading Isak because when you look at an Isak downgrade, I don't want to be buying someone in that price range, right? I
Yeah.
can get anyone below 7.3 million if I'm not mistaken, and no one really appeals as a perma play for this week and next week,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Wissa has tough fixtures. Evan Nelson has a tough fixture next week. Calvert-Lewin has a relatively tough fixture this week. So I don't really know where to
Nah,
go
there's
if I
no one
downgrade Isak.
really.
And Isak,
Yeah.
exactly. So Isak is fine to keep. I think for the next two fixtures against Wolves and Fulham, I'm more than happy to keep him, right?
Yeah.
Then comes Bruno. I've held on to him for so long that if I sell him before Southampton, which is probably the best fixture he's going to have all season, uh, I'm gonna regret it.
Yeah.
It's not something I want to do. I have considered it. I mean, Bruno to Minte is something I've considered. Bruno to Minte, Saka to Salah. It could work. It's not a bad transfer, but I am sort of wary selling Bruno. But it's not something I've completely written off. I might end up doing it because I'm getting Salah at least this week. The third option I can take is that I can sell again. Now this depends on Konsa's injury. Now that has thrown another spanner in the works. If Konsa is fit, if we get a credible leak or if we get a credible report that Konsa is training and is in the starting lineup against Everton on the weekend, then this move sort of becomes more tempting. I can sell Porro for a 4 million defender, right?
Yeah.
And then upgrade Saka to Salah. Because I have Dunk, Konsa, and Trent, I don't necessarily uh, need a fourth defender to fill in
Yeah.
because Konsa, Dunk, Trent, assuming that Konsa is fine, is a good enough defense for the next 2 weeks because the fixtures are nice, and then I can just wildcard in 6 anyway. It's a short-term fix, but it helps me get Salah without really compromising on too many positions elsewhere. I mean, I guess I lose Porro against Brentford, but I guess I have an okay defense, so it's not the end of the world. But again, this is sort of dependent on Konsa being fine. If Konsa isn't fine, then I can't make this transfer because I'll need Porro, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. And it's a very uncomfortable position to be in. If I had an obvious route, for example, an Isak downgrade to João Pedro, or let's say if I had one free transfer, then I would have made a Salah transfer. But because I'm sort of in this uncomfortable position where I can go one way and then also go the other, I'm sort of stuck in between. I don't really know where to go. And I was hoping something would come up before the deadline, which would help me fix it. But yeah, at the moment, I can go either way.
Mm. I think
and it's a swingy decision.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think a lot of this comes down to how much you really want to get Salah in this week and how big you think the difference is going to be between Saka and Salah's points this week in particular. Because as you said, it's not a move that you have to force because you're not going to captain him. But if you do think that it's, you said yourself, you're guaranteed getting Salah in game week 5, unless something crazy happens, right? So it's a move that you're going to do anyway, but it's just whether you want to force it this week. Do you think you really need to when, there's not really much upside in any other pick if Konsa's fit, for example? So yeah, I don't know.
I mean, hypothetically, if we were sitting at the start of the season, I had sort of looked forward, fast forwarded to game week 5 in my head and looked at Son as a potential captaincy option.
Okay.
I don't think I can do that. I'm not brave enough to take on Salah as a captain in game week 5 because neither does Son fill me with the same amount of confidence, and Salah's ownership is just going to be way too crazy for me to ignore. So Salah is coming in game week 5 for sure.
Yeah.
It's just whether I bring him in now or in game week 5. That's the only question in my head, and that's what is tricky to answer. If I am to bring him right now, how do I fund him? Right? That's the issue.
I would personally be inclined to roll in your position because I don't think the disparity between Saka and Salah this week in particular is crazy high anyway. Just looking at the predicted points, Salah's predicted to score about 1.5 to 2 points more than Saka, which I think is reasonable. And I think with the extra information and the extra transfer that you get next week, I think that's massive because then you can make a much more informed decision on whether you then want to sell Bruno. I think Palace away is a much tougher fixture than Southampton away, and that's that at that point. Yeah, it might be time to get rid of Bruno. It also means that you keep Porro for that fixture. I think that's a plum fixture, home to Brentford, and then you can get more information on Konza's injury as well. I think you should roll personally. I don't know what are you thinking so far? Like, well, if you had to make a decision now,
I would love the listeners and viewers to actually educate me and help me in this dilemma because I'm not sure which way I would go. But
it's a very, very tough decision. I will say that. This is why we love the game. This is a tough decision.
It is by far the toughest decision of the season so far.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know what, Jack? Coming to your point of saving, I hear you and I sort of hear where you're coming from. What it'll do is it'll give me three free transfers next week, right? And then I can use 2 to get Salah. And even when I wildcard in game week 6, which is likely to happen, it's still not locked in, but it's likely to happen. But if I wildcard in game week 6, hypothetically, I would still have 1 free transfer from the previous week, which is carrying forward, right? So that's another factor that it would give me an extra transfer later. And if I, currently from all the options we've discussed, I think I like the Porro to 4 million defender move more than the other funding transfers. But even if I do that, it's actually, I'm selling Porro to a dead slot to get Salah in for Saka for 2 free transfers. So when I think of it, it's basically comparing Saka plus 4 points versus Salah this week, right? It's actually a 4-point swing that way because every transfer, in my opinion, is worth close to 4 points, right?
Yeah.
So it will, let's say if I make this transfer, the season's so long, I'm sure at some point I'll be forced into a hit, right? That's the way I'm thinking of it. So when you look at it this way, Saka plus 4 versus Salah this week, you might be right. Saka plus 4 might win.
Well, according to the predicted points, you wouldn't do that then. I mean, it's not we don't play the game based on solely predicted points, but I don't know. It depends. I think it just does come down to how much you think the difference is between Salah and Saka in this week in particular. If there was any upside in any other move, I think then you'd go for it. But there literally is zero upside in the other move that you're going to do.
Okay, Jack. There are 2 narratives of this. One narrative is Saka has a great record against Spurs. He always tends to do well. If you look at his past record, he's done well against Spurs. The other narrative is that Odegaard is injured, Rice is suspended. Arsenal won't do as well, so it's fine to sell Saka. So, in hindsight, one of these narratives will naturally win. But at this point in time, I'm not sure there's enough information or enough between the 2 narratives to sort of decide which one to go with. So I'm fine selling Saka this week, but at the same time, I'm fine holding him. I don't think he's like a hard sell.
No, I completely agree with that. I would expect Saka to do relatively well. I think he's had a very good season so far. In that Brighton game, he looked unbelievable until that red card, which really did change the game. I mean, he had a couple of big chances. He could have got as many points as Salah if he hadn't got that red card, and then it might be a difference. If Rice hadn't got that red card, then it might be a different story. Yeah, there's no doubt about it that having no Rice and Odegaard is going to affect his potential output. It's just how much. And I think personally, I would value going with a little bit more information, especially with the likes of Bruno, and then you can, as I said, judge Konza going forward, and then maybe you get that upside from your other transfer rather than kind of not wasting it, but because you're getting Salah this week, it's just, I don't think that it's worth the lack of upside that you're doing with that second transfer just to fund Salah this week when you're not captaining him. That's personally what I think. But I don't know.
I get it.
It's tough. It's a really tough one. That is why we love the game. We've talked about this for 10 minutes now. We could go on and on about this move. That's why it's great.
During the international break, I was, sort of secretly hoping that something would come up which would make the decision for me. But at the back of my subconscious mind, I was still thinking about this, and it was a relatively tough decision because I'd make my mind up. Okay, with this, this logic of yours that saving would give me more flexibility, etc., etc. And then I would be like in the morning, and then in the afternoon I'd be like, if I'm getting Salah next week, why not get him in right now, right? Yeah. So it's a tricky one, and it depends on which way what way I wake up on the bed tomorrow. I'll leave this decision to tomorrow. I'll decide after the press conference. I'll be updating my team reveal article on the Fantasy Football Hub website. So if anyone is interested, they can get it.
That is worth mentioning that this decision is clearly not going to be made in this video today. If you do want to see what Bakar ends up doing before the deadline, because obviously something's going to happen, a decision is going to have to be made eventually, then go down below, click on the link, and sign up to Fantasy Football Hub, and yeah, see the article on the
Yeah,
website. Sorry, Bakar, go on.
yeah. I'd be curious to see what the AI is saying as well. But I
Yeah.
mean, how about this rogue idea of selling Isak to Welbeck to fund Saka to Salah?
Wow, that is
That is,
aggressive. I don't. You know what? I don't mind that at all. That's got upside to
it's
it.
not
I
crazy.
wouldn't sell Isaac this
It's
week.
not crazy.
Let's actually come to Isaac.
Yeah,
Let's come to Isaac because I'm keeping him
yeah.
this week, and I feel very fortunate to be able to keep him this week. As you said, if you didn't have João Pedro, that probably would be the move. I think there's a lot of upside in Isaac across these next two fixtures. What do you think about selling him? The most sold player this week.
I completely agree. I think he'll do well in the next two fixtures. I mean, I don't want to sell him. I mean, I'm only doing it if I decide to bring in Salah, and then if I had to sell someone and no other option was there, then I might look at this. But even I don't think I have the balls to do it. I think it's way too ballsy, this transfer. Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, the whole idea behind it is exciting, and I think it's one that could easily pay off. It's not crazy, right? This one,
absolutely.
but yeah, I mean, I still sort of think that João Pedro is in a league above Welbeck. So if it was for Pedro, I would have gotten him in simply because João Pedro gets taken off later, and he gets to play as the number 9 while Welbeck tends to get subbed early. Pedro's on penalties, and I think some of the comments from his manager and the fact that Brighton have no European football, and the rotation terrorist, if I may call him, Roberto De Zerbi isn't there at this season,
Wow.
right? So,
Fair
so
enough.
it's sort of easy to trust João Pedro in that sense because I think he'll be fine when it comes to minutes. I think even at the start of the season, I think those concerns regarding, let's say, him missing certain games was a bit exaggerated. I think he'll be fine for the weeks to come, even with the Brazilian duty. I expect him to be fine.
Okay, very interesting stuff. Let's have a look at your AI recommended transfers, guys. These are really interesting. I'm not sure if Bakar is going to like this at all, but it's so different to what we've actually just talked about here. And yeah, it's definitely giving you food for thought. So the recommendation for your transfer, and I'll tell you what I've done here in chip strategy, which is where you can tell the AI what you're planning to do with your chips. I've put in that you're likely to wildcard in game week 6. Is that, first of all, is that fair? Do
Yeah.
you think you are likely to wildcard in game week 6? If not, I'll
I mean,
remove
it's
it.
not locked. Um,
Only because that will
it's
affect
not
your
locked.
transfers, obviously, because then you can, it's only for the
Yeah,
next two.
it's not locked in, but I would say it's more than 50% likely at this point. So you
Okay.
can, I guess.
Okay. With that strategy in mind, the recommendation is to avoid Salah. And actually,
This week.
I think avoid him entirely, even in game week 5, which is crazy. But it actually favors getting Robertson in instead. So going from Porro
Yeah,
to
see,
Robertson
that's
and getting that
yeah.
Liverpool defense for these next two, and then I assume therefore obviously not captaining Salah in game week 5 and going elsewhere in game week 5, which is, I mean, that's, to me that sounds pretty mental, not captaining Salah in game week 5. But have you considered that, not going with Salah at all and then reconsidering on wildcard?
Uh, Jack, I think if I didn't own Kwanzaa, the Liverpool Kwanzaa,
Yeah,
if I didn't own him, then I think this move could have appealed. Let's say selling one of my defenders to upgrade to Robertson for the next two fixtures. Because if you're wildcarding in 6, then I completely get the idea of doubling up on Liverpool defense, and I really like that idea personally. But because it locks me out of Salah, that's why I don't really like the move, right?
yeah,
Uh, there is a word. Let's hypothetically, if you assume I didn't own Kwanzaa, and if I owned Barco, for example, right? I could have done Barco to Robertson this week. And next week, I could have done, let's say, Saka to Salah, funded by Haaland to another forward, because next week, I don't think Haaland will be my captain. And I'm not saying I will sell him next week, but I mean, if I needed someone to sell to fund Salah, then Haaland could have been sold for 1 week, right? It's not the end of the world
yeah.
because he's playing Arsenal. So it's a transfer which I think could have made sense had some other things been a bit different. But looking at my team, I don't think I'll be doing this because I don't want to be locked out of Salah.
Yeah, no, that is exactly what you'd be doing. You'd be saying right now, setting your stall out, saying I'm not getting Salah. Again, obviously the AI recommends based on predicted points and a load of other data, And if we're looking at game week 5 now, and the difference in expected points, predicted points between Salah and Haaland is actually not as much as you might think. Haaland at home against anyone is a good fixture realistically. Predicted to get 7.1 points against Arsenal. Salah at 8.3, obviously better, but it's not like, the predicted points are not saying that Salah is going to get 15 points and Haaland is going to get 2 or 6. It's actually way closer than that. Would you ever consider not getting in Salah? It's brutal, because when you look at Bournemouth at home compared to Arsenal at home, it's incomparable in our minds. But when you look at the actual data, maybe it's a lot closer than we're imagining. I don't know.
I mean, taking into account the relative risk which is involved, I don't think I would take this bet on, simply because it's way too high risk. I would rather get Salah in. Even if he fails, he's going to be mass captain. It's fine.
That's true.
We move on. I'll wildcard my way in 6, and hopefully I can pick up a few differentials there and make up any gains that I need to. I generally don't tend to take on captaincy, because captaincy, especially when you don't own a specific player, I mean, you're basically doubling the variance, and that can be very brutal, right? So, for example, this week, let's say for those of the FPL managers who didn't have Haaland, if Salah didn't score 16, 17, 18 points against Man United, it would have been a really, really brutal week for them, because Haaland had scored a hat-trick and he was mass captained, right? But they did require a huge performance for Salah to actually compensate for the Haaland loss. It's not something I would ever feel comfortable with. I mean, it works for some people, but generally in captaincy, when I don't tend to sort of go out of my way to take these risks on, especially when I think that Haaland, I don't think he's going to hit double digits against Arsenal, and Salah could easily hit double digits.
That is the difference between a human and an AI, is that obviously an AI doesn't play with any sort of fear at all, FOMO, EO, etc. And Robertson, it's so bullish on Robertson, and it really expects Robertson and Trent, that double up, to really do well over the next 2 game weeks, and then you wildcard in game week 6 and change all of that. And guys, it's worth saying that, Bakar, I don't think is going to go with this option, but maybe it's made him think just a little tiny bit. And if you guys want, some sort of inkling into what might be the best move for your team in terms of the predicted points and the data, obviously that removes all the human side of it, which is massive in FPL, but it's very interesting to see. And I, for one, did not expect the AI to suggest that. Then go ahead, click the link in the description, get your own AI recommended transfers personalized to your team, as you've just seen with Bakar. It's still 50% off at the time of recording if you haven't already signed up. We're only 3 game weeks into the season. There are still 35 to go. If you haven't done it yet, don't worry. The time hasn't gone. This, as you can tell by this video and the discussion we're having, is sort of when it gets tough and the decisions are really, really challenging. And I presume with you, Bakar, your decision is going to go down to the wire this week. So, it's the right time to do it if you haven't done so already. Click the link in the description or the pinned comments. Bakar, I think we should open this up a little bit to round off this video with some more general questions about maybe strategy.
Yeah, I mean, coming to strategy, I would like to make this point. At the start of the season, and I'm sure a lot of people will sort of say it in the comments, etc. as well. At the start of the season, I was fairly, let's say, anti going with Haaland and Salah in the same team. I did not think that there were enough enablers to make it worth it. At this point in time, though, why I'm doing it is, or I'm looking to do it, is only going to be for 1 or 2 weeks. And I still think going forward from game week 6, I won't have Salah in my team, even if I wildcard. It's because, firstly, Haaland is, in my opinion, is the optimal captain this week. Salah is the optimal captain next week. So it's obviously nice to have both. But crucially, it's because there a lot of enablers have emerged. Now, Rodgers is playing for 5 million. Aston Villa have a great run of fixtures. João Pedro's 5.5. Well, he's 5.7 now, 5.7 million. Brighton have a great run of fixtures. Similarly, there are other picks like, for example, Minte, great pick, I think, for what he offers, 5.5 million, 2 good fixtures. In defense, a lot of enablers have emerged who are, if you look at the likes of Rico Lewis, for example, 4.7 million, playing for Manchester City. So a lot of these enablers have actually made affording a Salah plus Trent team a lot easier than it appeared to be 1 month early in the season. So it's all about sort of reacting to the information that is available. And at this point in time, I think for the next 2 weeks, it sort of makes sense to go with both. And then after game week 6, you can we can sort of differ in strategy once again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, I agree with you. Over the next 2 weeks for sure. I think the thing with those sort of budget picks is you have to ask how long is this going to continue for. But when you have the wild card in the back pocket, you know, there's no real risk to going with these sort of players. I mean, we have sort of seen with some budget players who we might have thought were going to do really well this season. I'm thinking, yeah, and obviously it's only been 3 game weeks, but Muniz, Smith Rowe, for example, they were kind of jumped on by a lot of people early doors. Smith Rowe in particular. Maybe that form is sort of fading now. We might see the same. Well, Rogers hasn't returned yet, so saying he's a good budget option. Will he be long term? Don't really know. João Pedro, to be fair, does look very solid. But yeah, are you pretty set on then? I don't want to jump too far ahead, but going with just one premium on a wild card, and we can bring this to Game Week 4 actually, because a lot of managers out there will be on a wild card Game Week 4. Do you think it's best to go with just one of the premiums if you're wild carding
No,
this week?
not at all.
You would go for
No,
two
this
still.
week I would go with both. Absolutely. This week I
Okay.
would go with two
Okay.
because I think the short-term play is to have both,
Right.
right? But even if I'm wildcarding this week, I'd pick both, but then I would have Salah to Saka booked in for game week 6,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Yes, that's a transfer I would have booked in. Yeah, if I wildcard in 6, then I'll go with Haaland. I think that's Haaland and Saka, not Salah. But we can come to that later. I think let's discuss game week 4 wildcard because a lot of fellow FPL managers are on a wildcard this week, and there are plenty of questions that are coming in. Yeah, I'd pick Haaland. I'd pick Salah. What else would I do? This is
The
interesting.
tough one I think is in the cheaper players, the likes of the players you just mentioned. How many sort of riskier picks do you go for? Rico Lewis, for example, is one that I would love to own. It's just how long is he going to stay in the
So,
team? What are his expected minutes like going forward?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think what is going to be critical to sort of nailing this draft will be deciding which 3 Liverpool players to get.
Okay.
So Salah is obvious. Trent, I also think should be in the draft because his numbers have been incredible so far. He's top for XGI among defenders this season. I would prefer going with Robertson over Diaz or Jota. Now, I mean, Jota and Diaz have done well at the start of the season, but now with the Champions League kicking in, I'm not entirely sure about their minutes going forward. And Robertson just seems safer. So I think I would build my wildcard draft around those 3, then Haaland. And apart from that, Rico Lewis is fine. I mean, I won't say he's a must-have on wildcard, but he's fine because he's fine to have as long as you have good enough bench cover.
Yeah.
His numbers so far have been mental. I mean, I just posted a tweet recently where I was having a look at the penalty area touches for defenders. Rico Lewis has 18 penalty area touches in 3 games. The next best defender has 8. So
Wow.
he was clearly on another level when it comes to attacking threat. He's so attacking. I think it's a good pick, but I'm still not convinced whether he's going to play every game. I mean, Walker does exist and he can come in at any point. So if you're picking Lewis, I would have a good enough bench to cover. I also think I would have Porro because I've just looked at Porro. He's stopped for shots so far this season, and yes, the fixtures to come aren't the best, but for what he offers, I still think 5.5 million is a really good price to pay. And then you can sort of rotate him with, let's say, an Aston Villa defender. I don't know whether Konza will be fit. If he's fit, then he's a good option. If not, then Pau Torres could be a good pickup as well. Flecken rotates well with both Werberg and Henderson, so either of those is fine. And yeah, in midfield, I definitely have Eze and Mbomo because those are like 2 set and forget players to own for the long period. You can just forget them in your team, and you won't have to then
Yeah.
have the hassle of bringing them in later. And I would also like to probably go with 8 attackers as opposed to 7 on the wild card because
Really?
going with 8, yeah, I think I would go with 8
Ooh.
because going with 8, I'll tell you the reason. So I think João Pedro, Minte, they're good players the next 2 weeks, but we're making a draft for the rest of the season. But you need to have a plan B when their fixtures turn for João Pedro and Minte. Similarly, Rogers looks good right now, but what if he gets rotated in the Champions League when Villa are playing, right? So you need to have a backup, and for that, I would definitely have an 8th attacker. I've actually looked at Calvert-Lewin and I really like him. I mean, this may sound crazy, but
That
he's
does
only
sound
5.9
crazy.
million. He's only 5.9 million. The fixtures after this week are really good, and he sort of rotates well with the rest of the team that I mentioned. So I think I would go with that flexibility in my squad because the important thing to ensure while wildcarding this week is to make a good long-term, robust enough team. And for that, I think having, let's say, 4 solid defenders, 8 playable attackers is very, very crucial.
It's interesting. I would disagree with that. I've never liked having 8 attackers, and I think with the ability to carry through free transfers through a wild card, I reckon if you do have those picks like you're saying, the likes of Mbermo, Eze, who you know are just going to be set and forget, I think you can go with 7 and like use your transfers more aggressively. I don't know. Maybe it's some sort of bias because I just hate having bench points or having decisions with sort of players. And I know you can't play the game like that, but yeah, you are right. Like I've got the fixtures up on screen now. There are clear fixture swings. If you do have someone like a João Pedro, I mean, I think you have to have a Brighton attacker this week on a wild card. The fixtures do get very, very tough. I don't know if you can't make a transfer at that point.
You can, but my point is that you already have plenty of transfers booked in. So, for example, if I was wildcarding this week, I would not have any Arsenal. I would have one at best. At best. And for Game Week 6 and Game Week 7, a lot of people would want 3. So effectively, you have at least 2 free transfers booked in already. And this is assuming no injuries come up. If any other injuries come up, then you can.
No, I fully understand the logic. Yeah.
So you need to have a robust enough team to enable or sort of navigate yourself through any potential crisis that may arise. That's my point.
No, I completely get the logic. I think it's just more me personally as a manager. I don't like having 8 attackers, but I think that's down to personal preference really, and the fact that I've probably been burnt too many times in the past. But yeah, very interesting stuff, Bakar. I think we've covered a lot of stuff there. That's over half an hour of pretty in-depth chat, and I'm so interested to see what you end up doing with your team, because I feel like you might go for it a little bit more. I feel like it's tough when you know you want Salah next week to not get him this week.
I'm genuinely on the fence.
It's strange.
I
genuinely do think I would roll in your position, but again, it's the different paths are pretty. They're going to be swingy, as you said, and there's obviously no one right answer, which makes this really interesting.
I assume you're doing the same with your team?
No. My transfers have been made. I've made 3 free transfers.
You've gotten... Okay, Isak or João Pedro's done.
No, didn't do it. Didn't do it, my friend. Didn't have to.
You didn't buy João Pedro?
I bought João Pedro, but not for Isak. Isak has stayed.
Oh, so you sold Muniz then. Muniz was your third forward, right?
Yeah, so I needed the money to be able to do Saka up to Salah. I got Rodgers in for Gordon, but I needed a little bit more money. So I thought it was worth just using one more transfer.
I wish my transfers were that simple, because I mean your transfer is very, very obvious.
Yeah, it was relatively obvious. I reckon it was more just whether I wanted to use 3 or 2. 2 I would have had to keep Gordon and Muniz. I wasn't as keen on keeping, but
I think I would have sold Gordon anyway. I think that's another actually burning question to address. A lot of people have been asking about Gordon. I think there's so many good enablers for cheaper and other options that, like, if you sort of want to sell Gordon to enable Salah, then I would do it. He's not a hard sell, but if you want, let's say, to sell him to upgrade some of your other players, then I don't think it's a bad transfer.
Yeah, absolutely. Just putting in my transfers now to show the people before we end this. And this had to be done before price changes. As you can see, I've now not got enough to do it. But I mean, I tweeted this. I said, if I don't get 1 million points this week with this team, I'm going to be very upset, because it looks so strong. 10 home fixtures, Isak away to Wolves, who, as I've said, I'm very happy to keep. I think you do well these next 2 if Newcastle can turn their form around. But yes, that's going to do it for this video. Guys, let me know in the comments down below, how many points are you going to be happy with this week? I'm predicted to get 72.3 points, by the way, with a gaming rating of 96%. I do want 1 million points. I said it, but there we go.
I'm jealous of your team, Jack.
I feel like I'm in a good spot. But yeah, we'll see.
Are.
We'll see what happens. What happens. Guys, remember, if you are still watching this and you want to see what Bakar does, link down below. Sign up to Fantasy Football Hub. Bakar, thank you very much for your tips and advice. I think you've given a lot of value there to the people. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And we will catch you guys on the next one.